Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents Outbreak by Joshua C. Chad, narrated by Graham Halstead. 1. First Encounter. A shot echoed throughout the gas station, followed shortly by another. A young man cautiously approached his targets, making sure they were indeed dead. Both bodies had bullet holes in their heads. He moved through the rest of the station gathering supplies, always keeping his handgun close. When he was done, he went back outside and climbed into the passenger seat of a white truck parked next to the pumps. "You get anything good?" his brother asked him. "Nah, just the usual. A few canned goods and what have you. Nothing worth shouting over," he said, throwing the grocery bags into the back seat. "Let's roll out." As they sped down the highway, he couldn't help but smile. They were off to a great start. In the back seat were 3 cases of water and a pile of non-perishable food, along with 2 rifles and 2 shotguns, not to mention the beautiful blonde woman who returned his smile when he glanced back. He looked down at the AR-15 that rested next to his seat. It was a gorgeous firearm that had been through a lot lately, but never would he have imagined it being used to kill zombies, and yet it had done a lot more than that in the last day. The day had started off like any other summer day for James and Connor Andderson. They'd awakened early, doing a quick workout before breakfast, and then packed their things. They were going out to the ranch for the weekend to do some prairie dog and coyote hunting. Loading all their gear and guns into James's truck, they then got on their computers for a quick update. A couple days earlier, there had been several brutal murders in Hill City, Texas. Then, yesterday, Hill City had gone dark. Shortly after, the state troopers had been sent in, and nothing had been heard from them since. When the same thing started happening in other towns in eastern Texas last night, the National Guard had been sent in. Now there were rumors and videos circulating the internet. The dead were coming back to life. Of course, all the doomsayers were claiming zombies and the end of the world, but the more rational public wasn't buying it. Most of the media claimed some crap about statewide power outages. However, today there was new information that other states were experiencing similar scenarios. "Have you read this yet?" James asked his brother, pointing to the article on his screen. James was the older brother at 21 with short brown hair, hazel eyes, and an athletic build. Connor came over and started reading. He had his brown hair and a buzz cut and was the younger brother by 2 years, but was both taller and more muscular. The resemblance between the two, however, was striking, and they had often been asked if they were twins when they were younger. "This is getting serious," Connor said as he headed over to the phone. "I'm giving Mom and Dad a quick call to let them know we'll be gone for the weekend." James read the rest of the article, which claimed that none of the incidents were in any way related and that it was just coincidence. He didn't believe that for a second. The article was by CCN, and they never told the truth. "It's probably terrorists," he thought. "Well, they won't catch us with our pants down." Connor hung up the phone. "They said not to worry about them, that this will blow over soon and to have fun hunting." "Good. No use burning more daylight then. Let's hit the road and go shoot something." James shut his laptop and slipped it back in the case. Putting their boots on, they grabbed the last box of ammo before heading out the door. "We get everything?" James asked as he climbed into the driver's seat. "Of course we did. You already triple-checked." "Hey, you can never be too sure, bro." They pulled out, starting down their dirt driveway, and headed to town. 20 minutes later, they stopped for fuel in Cowtown, a small settlement in the plains of eastern Montana, where they filled up and got back on the road. They arrived at their hunting camp in the heart of the ranch at noon and unloaded the truck, putting their clothes in the bunk cabin, food in the cook shack, and guns in a green Ford Expedition aptly named the Death Wagon. A little while later, they were making dust fly down the bumpy dirt road to the first prairie dog town. Pulling up to a small rise above the dog town, James parked the Death Wagon. Getting out, they grabbed their AR-15s from beside them. Their ARs were things of beauty, with collapsible buttstocks, foregrips, bipods, and attachments on the rails for flashlights. Connor's was a Bushmaster with a 16-inch barrel and a 4x32 Trijicon ACOG optic, while James's was an S&W with a 16-inch barrel and 1 to 4 by 24 vortex-illuminated scope. They each shoved a magazine into their rifles and jacked around into the chamber. Lying prone, they looked down at the prairie dog town spread before them. "I have 2 spotted," James said, "about 200 yards out. Go to the right of the lone tree, about 10 yards, then down a little." "Got 'em," Connor said before James could finish talking. "You take the one on the left, and I'll get the one on the right. You lead." James had his crosshairs resting on the vermin the whole time Connor had been talking. When Connor finished, James slowly exhaled and squeezed the trigger. The prairie dog did a backflip as the 55-grain bullet collided with its body. Before the dog could land, Connor let a round fly, blowing the head off the other one. "Good shot," James said, congratulating his brother. "Okay, I got another set a little farther out, 300 yards this time. The big black hole, straight out." Connor's confirmation came a second later. "Target acquired. I'll take point this time. Same side as always." Aiming through their scopes at their prospective prairie dogs, they rested their reticles on the vermin. The shots were less than a second apart, and both dogs were dead after the dust settled. They continued for the next few hours, picking out prairie dogs and blasting them. They didn't always hit their mark, but the next time they made sure to correct their aim and not jerk the trigger. At the end of the day, back at camp, they cooked up a hearty dinner of venison. They had shot close to 200 rounds each and killed almost as many prairie dogs. It had been a good day of hunting, and they ate while watching Shooter on the small TV at camp before going to bed. The next morning, they went out early to coyote hunt, killing 3. During the middle of the day, they were out prairie dog hunting again, as the rodents liked it when it was hot. All in all, the brothers spent a beautiful weekend at the ranch. On Monday, they closed camp and loaded everything back into James's truck. They bumped along the rugged dirt road and finally made their way onto the paved road that led into town. But when they pulled into town around 8 a.m., they hadn't passed a single vehicle. "This is weird," James mumbled as he drove toward Main Street, heading for the grocery store. Turning the corner, they gasped. The street was littered with abandoned cars. Some had crashed into buildings, and others looked like they had been left in a hurry. But that wasn't the worst of it. There were bodies. Dead bodies, lying all over the street and slouched in the vehicles. "What the?" James said as he took in the scene. "What happened here?" Connor asked. The first body they reached was lying face down in the middle of the street. They got out of the truck, grabbing their holstered handguns and slipping them onto their belts. Slowly, they approached the body. "Hey, are you okay?" James asked. He was bending down to examine the body when the smell hit him. It was the stench of meat rotting in the hot sun. He'd smelled it before, but only with animals, never humans. Connor's training began to kick in. As a Marine, he'd been trained to survive, and even though his military career had been cut short and he'd never seen combat, his instincts were still strong. He was treating this like a war zone, except something wasn't right. If this was an attack by another country, where were all the soldiers? Or did this have something to do with all the blackouts? He couldn't put his finger on it, but something was terribly wrong with this situation. James rolled the body over while Connor stayed 2 steps behind, hand resting on the gun at his hip. "Holy," James said, covering his mouth with his hand. The corpse was bloated, with a gaping wound at his neck and a hole in his head. "He's been here at least a day. And bro, he's been shot in the head." "We need to get back to the truck and get out of here," Connor said with an edge to his voice. Something was definitely not right. "I agree," James said, standing to follow his brother back towards the truck. Something groaned behind them. Connor began to turn around while drawing his gun, and James followed suit. There was nothing there, only the bodies scattered on the street. "What was that?" James asked. "I don't know, but there," Connor said, pointing to movement 10 yards away. It was one of the bodies, and judging by the long black hair and delicate physique, it looked to be a woman. "Someone's alive!" James cried out, running toward the woman and holstering his gun. Connor followed. The woman rolled over and began to rise on unsteady legs. "Don't move! We're coming to you!" James shouted as he closed in. He was only 3 steps away when he came to a sudden halt, his eyes growing wide. The woman was standing, but shouldn't have been. Her right leg was twisted at an impossible angle, and bone was poking through torn skin. Half of her face was so mangled he could hardly tell she was human, and the one eye James could see was pale and lifeless. She slowly started limping towards him, dragging her broken leg and groaning, reaching for him. Then the smell hit him. Rotting meat. She smelled dead. "What the hell?" James said, drawing his handgun and taking a few quick steps back to join his brother. "She isn't what I think she is she?" Connor asked. Her groans intensified as she began picking up speed. "She can't be, can she?" James asked. "Stop, or we'll shoot," Connor yelled, then turned to his brother and asked, "What do we do?" "Let's drop back and figure it out. She's not coming too fast." They backed up while keeping their guns trained on her. Clearly, she should be dead. They could see that. Somehow, she wasn't. But she wasn't exactly alive, either. "She's a zombie," James said. I mean, look at her wounds. She should be dead right now." "Then I guess it's time to shoot her. I mean, it. Shoot it," Connor said. He'd come to terms with what it was, and he was ready to deal with it. Moving his sights from her chest to her uninjured leg, he fired. Her knee shattered, and she crumpled to the ground, but she kept coming, dragging her body and useless legs behind her. "This is unreal," James said. Connor aimed his gun at her chest and squeezed the trigger. The bullet flew out of the gun, blowing a hole in her heart. Her body shuddered with the impact, but she kept coming. Finally, he aimed at her head, ready to end this. His left index finger squeezed the trigger, and her head jerked back. She fell onto her face, unmoving, blood slowly pooling on the blacktop. He lowered his gun, feeling a mix of emotions, but he pushed all those away. He would deal with them later. Right now, they needed to survive. James shook his head. "She was a zombie. This is crazy. It's actually happening. The zombie apocalypse. You'd better get used to it, because we're going to be facing a lot more. I don't want you to freeze when I think you have my back," Connor said a little harshly. His words woke James up. "Don't worry. I would never hesitate to pull the trigger. You know that. I have your back, bro, against a person or a zombie." He put his hand on his brother's shoulder. "You did what you had to do. Now let's get out of here." Connor sighed. His older brother knew him so well, and with just those few words he had erased most of his doubts. They quickly walked back to the truck, keeping their guns at the ready. Jumping in, James made a sharp U-turn, leaving the carnage behind. Connor reached into the back seat and pulled his AR out of the case and loaded a 30-round magazine. He chambered around and smiled at his brother. "At least we have a plan for this, right, bro?" James couldn't help but smile in return. "Yeah, we do." It was true. They had created a far-fetched plan for this, though neither thought they would actually use it one day. It had just been a joke. But now it was real, and they would put their plan into action. It was a simple plan, really. They would gather their remaining family, maybe a couple of close friends, and head to their remote lodge in Alaska. There they had everything they needed to be self-sufficient, with occasional supply trips into town using the bush plane Connor flew. The remoteness of the location would keep them safe from most of the zombies, and they would be able to live a somewhat normal life again, assuming everything went according to the plan, though it rarely did. Once on I-94, they knew for sure. This was real. Abandoned cars were scattered on both sides of the interstate, accompanied by a few bodies and, every once in a while, a walking corpse. As such, the drive home took a little longer than usual. Each absorbed in their own thoughts, they drove in silence all the way to the dirt road that led to their house. "So, how do you think it spreads? It has to be airborne, right? How else would it get to Cowtown?" James asked. "Your guess is as good as mine. We must have missed a lot in the last couple days. I hope the internet and cell towers still work." Then it hit him. Their parents weren't at home, safe and sound. They were hundreds of miles away in Nebraska visiting family. "We need to get home. Quick!" "On it." James stepped on the gas, and the truck sped off down the dirt road. Arriving at the house, James ran inside while Connor unloaded the truck, putting everything on the porch. Inside, James took a deep breath and said a quick prayer before picking his cell phone up off the desk. He turned it on and waited while it acquired a signal. Once it found service, he quickly dialed his mom's cell number and waited. The power worked and there was still cell coverage, but how long would that last?
"Oh, thank God you're okay. We've been so worried. We called the house earlier. We didn't know if you boys were still at the ranch or if something had happened," his mom, Diana, said.
"We're good," James said. "We were at the ranch the whole weekend. We didn't know anything was wrong until today. We need to be filled in and fast."
"The truth came out the day you boys left. The government announced the outbreak of a deadly infection. It started in the towns where the blackouts took place, and they tried to contain it there but failed. It hit all the major cities yesterday, and nothing has been heard from them since. It's just like all the zombie movies you boys watch. You get bitten and you turn. The government says everyone needs to barricade their house and stay indoors."
Damn, this is worse than I thought. Are you guys safe?
"Yes, honey. No one in town has turned yet, and we are barricaded in. We'll be okay. Plus, God is watching over us."
Good. You guys need to hold tight. Connor is packing the truck, and we'll be leaving shortly. You need to get to a defensible spot, get enough supplies for a few days, and stay there. We'll be down as soon as we can, and we'll pick you up and head to Alaska. You remember our apocalypse plan, right? She chuckled a little.
"I remember, but I always thought you boys were silly for having it."
So did we until today. Either way, we're putting it into motion. You need to stay put and stay safe.
"We will, James. Your dad wants to talk. I love you, son. I'm praying for you boys."
Thanks, Mom. I love you too. We'll need all the prayers we can get if we're to survive this. Son, are you there? Jack said after a brief pause. There was a strength and determination in his voice that always comforted James and gave him courage. Yes, Dad, I'm here. Are you really safe? What's the weapon situation? Don't worry about us, son. We have enough guns and ammo thanks to some of your great uncles. We're safe and secure for now. The whatever it is hasn't hit us yet. We'll be fine. You just watch your brother's back, okay? I'm counting on you two. I will, Dad. We'll be okay. We're more prepared than most. I love you. I love you too, son. Now remember, we are Andersons. We never back down, and we never give up. Mess with the best, die like the rest. That was exactly what James needed to hear. He wiped a tear from his eye and handed the phone to Connor, who had just walked in. James stood there for a moment, visibly at ease. A great weight had been lifted, replaced by determination and a desire to survive. Their parents were safe for now. Mom was praying for them, and that meant she still had faith. And if she does, so do I, he thought. While he didn't know all the theological answers or reasons why God would allow this to happen, he did know a few things. The end times were talked about in the Bible as a time when God would let evil reign for 7 years, and the 4 horsemen would come and destroy 1/4 of the population with, among other things, a plague. He didn't know if that was what this was, and he didn't care. He knew who his Savior was and where he and his family would go after all this. And even in this, he could feel deep in his heart that God was with him. Quickly running into the basement, he got all the ammo he could in one trip and headed back up the stairs and out onto the porch. He walked back in as his brother finished talking to their mom. I love you too, and we'll call you soon, Connor said, hanging up the phone. They're safe. Yes, they are. And God is with them and us, James said, going to his brother and hugging him. Yes, he is, even in these times. They broke the embrace and stood there looking at one another. Connor grasped James's forearm. And we also have each other. We'll always have each other. Brothers till we die. Amen to that, brother. Now let's get packed. They spent the next half hour getting all their gear together. Luckily, they were hunters and keen on buying ammo in bulk. Together, they had thousands of rounds of .223 or .556 millimeter, 45, 40, and 9 millimeter, plus hundreds of rounds for their shotguns and rifles. They took their primary guns out and put them on the porch, then put the remaining in a duffel and threw it into the back of the truck. Once they had their food, water, ammo, bedding, clothes, backpacks, and miscellaneous gear in the bed, they packed the back seat. Lying in the middle was James's Benelli semi-auto 12-gauge shotgun, his Kimber Mountain Ascent .280 rifle with a 4-16 by 44 Vortex scope, and katana, along with Connor's 10-gauge pump-action shotgun. Remington 308 rifle with a 3-10 by 42 loopholed scope, and a machete. Also in the back seat, they had plenty of ammo for the guns, along with some food, water, and other miscellaneous gear they might need in a hurry. "Well, I think we got it all," Connor said, looking at the loaded truck. A white Dodge Ram 1500 crew cab with a lift kit, brush guard, and matching topper. "I think so. It's almost like we were already prepared for this," James chuckled. "I guess we kind of were." James picked up his AR and chambered around, his brother doing the same. "Hey, look at us," James said, pointing at their reflection in the glass screen door as they stood there, holding their ARs. Connor wore his Cryptek camouflage shirt and pants, combat boots, black hat, aviator sunglasses, and Kimber 1911 handgun on his hip. He had on his tactical vest, which held 3 magazines for his handgun, 6 magazines for his AR, a K-bar knife, and a multi-tool. James wore his Cryptek camouflage shirt, hat, and pants, hiking boots, transition lens glasses, and Springfield XDM handgun on his hip. He had on his tactical vest with 3 magazines for his handgun, 6 magazines for his AR, a long-bladed hunting knife, and a multi-tool. They had attached the tactical flashlights to their ARs, which were now fully decked out. "We look badass," James said. "Yeah, we do." "Well, let's lock and load then." James climbed into the driver's seat and stuck his AR next to him, going through a mental checklist. With everything checked off, he said a quick prayer for protection and guidance. Connor went through the house one last time, making sure they hadn't forgotten anything. "We're all good to go, bro. Let's hit the road," Connor said, getting into the truck and setting his AR next to him. The brothers pulled away from their house and looked up the hill to their parents' house. The boys' house was old and poorly made, but livable and the right price for the brothers. Their parents' house was brand new. They'd built it a couple of years ago, moving out of the old house and letting James and Connor buy it. The family had lived here for years, and now in the course of a single weekend, everything had changed. They looked at the 2 houses and rolling gumbo hills, knowing this would be the last time they ever laid eyes on it. Finally, they pulled away, heading down the driveway. "Hey, Connor, put on some tunes." "Are you kidding me right now? You actually remembered to bring your iPod?" Connor asked, reaching down to hook up the iPod and then flipping through it. "Just because it's the end of the world doesn't mean we can't ride in style." They turned off the dirt road onto the highway. After a few minutes, James asked, "What's taking so long, bro? I'd like some music today." "One sec. You'll thank me when I'm done." Just then, the music came on. It was Back from the Dead by Skillet. They started cracking up. It was just too ironic. "Let me guess, a zombie playlist?" "Close. It's our Apocalypse road trip playlist," Connor said as they continued to smile. "You know what? This isn't going to be that terrible. I mean, we're still alive and so are our parents. We're armed to the teeth and have all the skills needed to survive. We can stay alive and start over. This doesn't have to be the end." "You're very right, brother, and most importantly, we have each other. As long as we have that, we'll survive. Don't ever forget, we ride together, we die together." "Badass brothers for life," they said in unison as they sped down the highway to face the apocalypse. 2. Breaking news. Friday, day before the official outbreak.
If you're just now joining us, nothing has been heard from Hill City. A dozen Texas state troopers have gone in to help with the power outage, and Texas Governor Henry Price urges citizens not to worry. Wait. There was a brief pause, then the news announcer continued. "I'm getting some new information here. Yes, it seems that Lufkin, Jasper, and Nacogdoches are also experiencing blackouts. The radio cut off, and Emmett stood up from the couch. He'd been hoping his gut feeling was wrong, and that the murders had been nothing, but now he knew his fears were well-founded. He thought back to his past employer and shook his head. Their greed will be the death of us all, he thought as he opened a drawer and pulled out a Beretta M9 handgun. He put on a shoulder holster, sliding the gun on one side and 2 magazines on the other. He then pulled out a tactical belt with another Beretta M9, 6 magazines of ammo, a tactical knife, and a few pouches. Putting the belt on, he walked over and looked in the mirror. He had short black hair, brown eyes, a scar on his left cheek, and features like a hawk. He was in great shape, which made it hard to tell he was 40 years old.
He wore a white t-shirt, loose-fitting jeans, and combat boots. He put on his black cowboy hat and dark brown duster, which had an odd assortment of items in the pockets. Then he pulled 2 duffel bags out from under the bed and went outside. He put the bags in the bed of his black 4-door Ford F-450 Super Duty, but it wasn't a normal F-450. The year before, he'd put over $300,000 of upgrades into it, making it a fortress on wheels. He'd upgraded the engine, tires, and suspension, and the inside was as tricked out as it could get. There were bars over the windows, including the windshield and topper windows, which were all made of bulletproof glass. The body of the truck was also bulletproof, with extra plating welded on in strategic locations. Add to that, the matching heavy-duty topper had a pivoting shooting bench welded to the roof, and the heavy-duty grill guard with a winch. There was an assortment of canned and dried food and drinks under the back seat, and ammo was shoved into the pockets on the backs of his seat covers. In the middle of the back seat was a weapons rack with a semi-auto 12-gauge shotgun with a collapsible buttstock and flashlight, a 6.5 Creedmoor custom rifle with a 6-24x50 Vortex scope, an AK-47 with iron sights, an H&K MP5 submachine gun, and a Desert Eagle with extended magazine. They were all strapped down so they wouldn't move around but could be grabbed quickly. In the front passenger seat, there was a sawed-off 10-gauge pump-action shotgun and a machete. This would be an odd and expensive collection for the average Joe, but Emmett Wolfe was far from average. He had served in the Marines during his younger years. After the Corps, he went to work in private security, most recently for his father-in-law's corporation, LifeWork. He had been the head of security at their main plant until quitting because of something he'd discovered. That was over a year ago, and since then he'd spent his time preparing for an event he hoped would never take place. Through all this, he'd never thought it was possible that it would actually happen. He checked the back of the truck, making sure the topper was secure. Then he checked the bed, which contained mattresses, sleeping bags, a tent, 2 duffel bags with guns and ammo, fuel cans, totes of food, and a bolted-down toolbox cabinet. Everything was in order, so he headed back inside to do one last walkthrough. He grabbed a duffel bag of clothes from the closet, and his Colt M4 carbine rifle with a red dot sight, suppressor, and flashlight from beside the front door. He then shut the door and screwed 4 boards over it. The rest of the house was barricaded in similar fashion. He didn't plan on coming back here, but he was keeping it as an option. The truck roared to life as he took off down the driveway, the afternoon sun high in the sky. When he arrived at the highway 15 minutes later, he turned east toward his ex-wife's house. He needed to get there fast. Jane lived just outside of Hill City, and their daughter would be with her for summer break. 6 hours later, he was approaching Hill City and had seen very little traffic for the last half hour. Is it that bad already? He thought. Emmett turned onto his ex-wife's road and pulled into her driveway, noticing a body lying on the ground. He grabbed his 10-gauge and machete from the seat next to him, slipping it into a sheath on his left hip. He chambered around into the 10-gauge and walked up to the body, nudging it with the barrel of his shotgun. But nothing happened. He carefully flipped it over with his boot to get a look at the face. It was male, approximately 30 years old. This was not his ex-wife's current husband, which meant they could still be alive, hopefully. Putting the shotgun to his shoulder, he walked towards the front door. When he arrived, he noticed it was cracked. He leaned against the wall and, taking his left hand off of the shotgun, he eased the door open. There was a loud bang, and the door exploded in front of him. He quickly withdrew his hand and looked at the door, which now had a large hole in the center of it. "Watch it, you moron. Do I look like one of them?" Emmett asked the unknown shooter. "No, none of them could talk," a man's voice said from inside. "Well, at least you're not completely brainless. I'm coming in, George. Don't shoot." He stepped from the wall and went through the front door. Inside was a hallway, and at the end of the hallway there was a makeshift barricade with a man standing behind it. George looked scared standing there with a shotgun at his shoulder. He had blood splattered on the front and sleeves of his jacket. 2 bodies rested face down on the floor in front of the barricade. "Where are Jane and Alexis?" Emmett asked. "They're behind me in the bathroom. Is that you, Emmett? What's going on? Why do you look like you're ready for a war?" George asked, lowering his shotgun. "Yes, it's me, you twit, and that's because I am ready for a war. I'll explain everything once we get to the truck." He headed over to the barricade and vaulted over it, then opened the door on the left, and Alexis, his 20-year-old daughter, came running.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?